There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It just lingers, quietly, in the space where a message should have been. In the pause after you post something and pretend you don't care who sees it. In the way your body still remembers someone who trained your nervous system to wait, to hope, to freeze. And when an avoidant ex leaves, the silence feels especially cruel because it makes you question everything. If they cared, why did they disappear so cleanly? Why did they look so calm while you were collapsing inside? Why did it feel like you were grieving something sacred while they walked away like they had simply turned off a light? That confusion is what keeps you trapped. Not just the loss, the contradiction. Because deep down, part of you is still asking the question you're almost too ashamed to say out loud. Do they regret losing me? And the brutal truth is this. If you keep needing proof, you will miss the signs completely. Because avoidant regret does not usually arrive in a dramatic confession. It doesn't come with trembling apologies and cinematic honesty. It comes sideways, delayed, disguised, half buried under pride, self-protection, and nervous system overwhelm. That is why so many people misread it. They think no emotion means no impact. They think distance means indifference. They think an avoidant ex moved on because they looked composed. But composure is not peace. For someone wired to suppress, composure can just be armor with a pulse underneath it. And that changes everything. Because avoidant people do not always shut down because they stopped caring. Often, they shut down because caring started to cost them too much. Too much closeness, too much exposure, too much activation in a body that learned long ago that love can become pressure, expectation, engulfment, obligation. Their nervous system doesn't always read intimacy as safety. Sometimes it reads it as danger. So while you were trying to get closer, their body may have been sending out alarms. Not because you were too much, because connection itself became too much. That's the part people don't tell you. An avoidant ex can miss you and still run from you. They can feel attachment and suppress it at the same time. They can think about you while acting untouched. Their mind says, I need space. Their body says, thank God, relief. But relief is not the same as freedom. Relief is what happens when cortisol drops after stress. It feels like peace at first, but it doesn't mean the bond is gone. It just means the threat signal eased for a moment.
And later, when the room is quiet, when your energy is no longer chasing them, when the pressure to respond disappears, that is often when the emotional truth starts creeping back in. Slowly, uncomfortably, uninvited. Because once the threat of closeness is gone, they are left with something they can no longer blame on you. Absence. And absence has a strange way of speaking to avoidant people. Not loudly, but persistently. A song, a scent, a restaurant, a Sunday afternoon with no one texting them, a photo they pretend not to look at. The body relaxes. Then the ache begins. The amygdala stops screaming danger, and what comes next is harder to control. Memory. Dopamine no longer gets fed by the push-pull dynamic. The nervous system loses the stimulation of escape, and suddenly, what they ran from starts looking different in retrospect. Softer, warmer, rarer. That's when regret begins. Not always enough to make them change, but enough to make them feel. And the first sign your avoidant ex regrets losing you is this.
they start finding ways to stay near you without truly approaching you. This is the quiet orbit. They watch your stories but never reply. They unblock you and say nothing. They ask a mutual friend how you're doing in a tone that sounds casual, but it lands too carefully to be casual. They revisit your digital presence like someone standing outside a house they used to live in, telling themselves they're just passing by. This is not random. An avoidant ex who feels nothing usually keeps moving. But an avoidant ex who regrets the loss often begins with indirect contact because direct vulnerability still feels too exposed. They want information without risk, access without surrender. They want to know if you're still there before they let themselves feel how much they miss you. So they peek. They hover. They monitor. And if you still react every time, if you still make your availability obvious, they calm down again. Because now the bond still belongs to them. They have not lost it fully. They can still reach for your energy without earning your presence. That is why silence becomes so powerful here. Not punishment, not game playing. Silence as self-possession. Because the moment you stop feeding the old dynamic, they are forced to meet the reality they were avoiding. You are no longer emotionally on call. You are no longer proving your devotion through pain. And now, for the first time, your absence becomes emotionally legible to them. The second sign is that their contact becomes weirdly practical, small, or unnecessary. Not a grand apology, not a vulnerable paragraph. Something oddly ordinary.
Hey, did you ever get that thing fixed? I found your book. Random question. Hope you're doing okay. This confuses people because it seems too minor to mean anything. But with avoidant people, emotional exposure is often smuggled through ordinary language. They do not always reach out with the truth. They reach out with a doorway, a test, a soft knock. Because saying, "I miss you," is too naked. But saying, "Just thought of you," hidden inside a logistical excuse, feels survivable. Listen closely to the energy, not just the words. If someone who once disappeared suddenly keeps reopening tiny channels, it often means the emotional distance they fought so hard to create is no longer soothing them the way they expected. The detachment that once felt powerful starts feeling empty, and emptiness is where regret starts breathing. The third sign is subtler but deeper. They begin to soften the story of you. When avoidant people leave, they often need a strong internal narrative to justify it. You were too intense. The relationship was too much. They needed freedom. It wasn't right. That story helps them deactivate attachment and reduce inner conflict. But regret changes the narrative. Slowly, they stop framing the relationship only through pressure and start remembering tenderness, your patience, your warmth, the way you understood them without demanding language they didn't yet have. They may not tell you directly at first, but it leaks. A mutual friend mentions they said you were a good person. They reference a memory with surprising warmth. They suddenly remember details they once acted too detached to value. Maybe they even apologize for one specific thing, not because they're fully transformed, but because their old version of the story is cracking. That crack matters, because once they can no longer make you the villain, they have to face the possibility that they lost something real. And that realization hurts. Not in the loud way it hurts for anxious people, not in a flood. In avoidant people, regret often comes as a haunting, an internal disturbance, a persistent thought they can't fully sedate, a growing awareness that what they called too much
may have actually been intimacy. What they called pressure may have actually been consistency. What they escaped was not just conflict. It was closeness they did not know how to hold. The fourth sign is that other people stop working. This one is important. After a breakup, avoidant people can feel immediate relief. Space, control, lower activation, sometimes even a kind of emotional high. They tell themselves they're better off. They enjoy the return to autonomy.
They may talk to someone new. They may seem lighter, more alive, more available to the world than they ever were with you. Do not worship that stage. It is often deceptive, because relief is not resolution. Eventually, the novelty fades. The dopamine of distraction weakens. The replacement connection asks for depth or consistency or emotional presence, and the same old wiring gets touched again. But now something happens that they did not expect. You become the comparison, not because you were perfect, because you were familiar in a way their nervous system can't easily erase. You knew their rhythms, their shutdowns, their hidden softness. And when they meet someone else who doesn't carry that emotional history, they may feel a strange flatness. Easier, maybe, but thinner, less alive, less known. This is when regret deepens, because now it is no longer abstract. It is embodied. They feel the difference. The person they left is no longer just a memory. You become the standard they are secretly measuring against. And that is when some of them circle back. Not always with maturity, not always with clarity. Sometimes just with increased attention, stronger curiosity, more emotional leakage. But the pull grows stronger because what they lost has started to become real. The fifth sign is the one people wait for but often mishandle. They react when they feel you are truly moving on. This is where the power dynamic flips. As long as they believe you are still emotionally tethered, regret stays muted. Why? Because there is no real loss yet. You are still psychologically available, still within reach, still part of their nervous system's map. But when your energy changes, everything changes. When your replies become calm instead of hungry, when you stop over-explaining, when your social presence feels alive but not aimed at them, when they sense that you are no longer waiting in the same place they left you, something primal gets activated. Now the bond feels endangered from their side. Now they are the one outside the door. And that can trigger what looks like sudden intensity, more messages, faster responses, unexpected vulnerability, jealousy disguised as curiosity, questions about your life that carry too much charge, a tone that says, "Are you really gone?" without ever saying those words. This is the moment many people ruin everything, because the second the avoidant ex leans in, the abandoned self inside you wants to rush forward and collapse into hope. You want to decode every breadcrumb as destiny. You want to give them instant access, instant reassurance, instant emotional certainty. But if you do that too soon, you reset the old system. You remove the tension that was forcing them to feel. You become available before they become accountable, and the pattern begins again. This is your warning. Do not confuse activation with transformation. An avoidant ex can miss you deeply and still not be ready to love you safely. They can regret losing you and still repeat the same wound. They can come closer because they feel your absence, but unless they have confronted their own defenses, learned to tolerate intimacy, and taken responsibility for the damage they caused, regret alone is not enough. Regret is a feeling. Change is a practice. Never trade your healing for their temporary awakening. Because the deepest shift in this story is not that they start chasing, it is that you stop needing to be chased in order to know your worth. Read that again in your body. Your worth does not begin at their regret. It does not become real because they came back. It does not rise because they finally saw what you were. You were already that. Already rare. Already deep. Already loving. Already powerful. The tragedy was never that you were hard to love. The tragedy was that you kept offering sacred energy to someone whose nervous system translated intimacy into danger. And then you made their confusion mean something about your value. It never did. And when that truth lands, something almost holy happens inside you. You stop performing pain for proof. You stop checking if they watched. You stop building your life around a delayed emotional response from someone who could only love you in fragments. You become still. And that stillness is not emptiness. It is power. Because this is the secret no one tells you. The moment an avoidant ex feels your detachment is real, they may finally feel the weight of losing you. But by then, if you have done your work, their regret is no longer your oxygen. It is just information, a sign, not a salvation. You no longer need their return to complete the story. You become the ending they could not control. And that is why your silence, your groundedness, your refusal to chase becomes so psychologically loud. It is not manipulation. It is the nervous system of a person who has finally chosen themselves. You are no longer trying to force love out of fear. You are no longer begging to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding closeness. You are no longer shrinking your needs to fit inside another person's avoidance. You stand up internally. You become unavailable for half-love, unavailable for confusion, unavailable for emotional crumbs disguised as destiny. And yes, that is often when they feel it most. When your energy leaves the cage, when your warmth is no longer begging to be chosen, when they realize the version of you who would have waited, explained, chased, forgiven without repair, is gone. That is when regret becomes sharp. Because now they are not just missing your presence. They are confronting their own incapacity. They are face to face with the thing they spent so long avoiding. The cost of self-protection. And you? You are no longer standing there asking whether they care. You are becoming someone whose life no longer bends around that question. That is the real power shift. Not that they obsess, not that they come back, not even that they finally understand you. It is that you understand yourself. You understand that love should not feel like emotional exile, that chemistry without safety is not intimacy, that someone can feel overwhelmed and still be responsible for how they hurt you, that compassion for their wounds does not require abandoning your own. So if they regret losing you, let them feel it. Let them sit with the silence they once handed you. Let them meet the version of you that no longer bleeds for access. And if they return, let it be to a person who now has standards, not just hope. A person who can recognize the difference between longing and readiness. A person who does not light themselves on fire just because someone else finally feels cold. This is your identity shift.
You are not the one left behind. You are the one who survived emotional starvation and learned not to call it love. You are the one who turned confusion into clarity. You are the one who stopped chasing the unavailable and became unavailable to what diminishes you. And that changes your face, your voice, your energy, your entire life. Because once you stop asking whether they regret losing you, you become the person they regret losing. And more importantly, you become the person you never lose again.